Book 1, Canto 7. The Legend of the Knight of Red Cross. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Morgan Scorpion. The Faerie Queene by Edmund Spenser. Book 1. The Legend of the Knight of Red Cross. Canto 7. The Red Cross Knight is captive made by giant proud oppressed. Prince Arthur meets with Una greatly with those news distressed. What man so wise, what earthly wit so ware, as to descry the crafty cunning train, by which deceit doth mask in visor fair, and cast her colours, dyed deep in grain, to seem like truth, whose shape she well can feign, and fitting gestures to her purpose frame, the guiltless man with guile to entertain. Great maistress of her art was that false dame, the false Duessa, cloaked with Fidessa's name, who when returning from the dreary night, she frowned not in that perilous house of pride, where she had left the noble Red Cross Knight. Her hoped prey she would no longer bide, but forth she went to seek him far and wide. Ere long she found, whereas he weary sate, to rest himself, for by a fountain side, disarmed all of iron-cloated plate, and by his side his steed the grassy forage ate. He feeds upon the cooling shade, and bathes his sweaty forehead in the breathing wind, which through the trembling leaves full gently plays, wherein the cheerful birds of sundry kind do chant sweet music to delight his mind. The witch approaching gan him fairly greet, and with reproach of carelessness unkind, upbraid for leaving her in place unmeet, with foul words tempering fair, sour gall with honey sweet. Unkindness past, they gan of solace treat, and bathe in pleasance of the joyous shade, which shielded them against the boiling heat, and with green boughs decking a gloomy glade, about the fountain like a girland made, whose bubbling wave did ever freshly well, ne ever would through fervent summer fade the sacred nymph, which therein wont to dwell, was out of Dian's favour, as it then befell. The cause was this: one day when Phoebus fair with all her band was following the chase, this nymph, quite tired with heat of scorching air, sat down to rest in middest of the race. The goddess wrath gan foully her disgrace, and bade the waters, which from her did flow, be such as she herself was then in place. Therefore her waters waxed dull and slow, and all that drunk thereof did faint and feeble grow. Hereof this gentle knight unweeting was, and lying down upon the sandy grail, drunk of the stream, as clear as crystal glass, eftsoons his manly forces gan to fail, and mighty strong was turned to feeble frail. His changed powers at first themselves not felt, till crudel cold his courage gan assail, and cheerful blood in faintness chill did melt, which like a fever fit through all his body swelt. Yet goodly court he made still to his dame, poured out in looseness on the grassy ground, both careless of his health and of his fame, till at last he heard a dreadful sound, which through the wood loud bellowing did rebound, that all the earth for terror seemed to shake, and trees did tremble. The elf therewith astound, upstarted lightly from his looser make, and his unready weapon gan in hand to take. But ere he could his armour on him dight, or get his shield, his monstrous enemy with sturdy steps came stalking in his sight, an hideous giant, horrible and high, that with his tallness seemed to threat the sky. The ground eke groaned under him for dreed, his living like saw never living eye, nor durst behold. His stature did exceed the height of 3 the tallest sons of mortal seed. The greatest earth his uncouth mother was, and blustring Aeolus his boasted sire, who with his breath, which through the world doth pass, her hollow womb did secretly inspire, and filled her hidden caves with stormy ire, that she conceived, and trebling the due time, in which the wombs of women do expire, brought forth this monstrous mass of earthly slime, puffed up with empty wind, and filled with sinful crime. So growen great, through arrogant delight of the high descent, whereof he was yborne, and through presumption of his matchless might, all other powers and knighthood he did scorne. Such now he marcheth to this man forlorne, And left to lofle, his ftalking fteps are ftayd Upon a fnaggy oake, which he had torne Out of his mothers bowels, and it made His mortall mace, wherewith his foeman he difmayd. That when the knight he fpide, he gan advance With huge force and infupportable maine, And towards him with dreadfull fury prance, Who haplefle, and eke hopelefle, all in vaine Did to him pace, fad battell to darraine, Disarm'd, difgraced, and inwardly difmayd, And eke fo faint in every joynt and veine, Through that faile fountaine, which him feeble made, That fcarcely could he wield his bootlefle fingle blade. The Geant ftroke fo mainely mercilefle, That could have overthrowne a stony towre, And were not heavenly grace that him did blefle, He had been pounded all as thin as flowre. But he was wary of that deadly ftarre, And lightly leapt from underneath the blow. Yet fo exceeding was the villaines powre, That with the wind it did him overthrow, And all his fences ftound, that ftill he lay full low. As when that devilifh young Injun wrought In deepeft hell, and framed by Furies fkill, With windy nitre and quick sulphur fraught, And ramm'd with bullet round ordained to kill, Conceiveth fire, the heavens it doth fill With thundring noyfe, and all the aire doth choke, That none can breathe, nor see, nor heare at will, Through fmoky cloud of dufkifh ftinking fmoke, That the onely breath him daunts, who hath escap'd the ftroke. So daunted when the Gyant faw the knight, His heavy hand he heaped up on high, And him to duft thought to have battered quite, Until Duessa loud to him gan cry: O great Orgoglio, greateft under fky, O hold thy mortall hand for Ladies fake, Hold for my fake, and doe him not to die, But vanquifht thine eternall bondflave make, And me thy worthy meed unto thy leman take. He hearkened, and did ftay from further harmes, To gaine fo goodly guerdon, as fhe spake. So willingly fhe came into his armes, Who her as willingly did grace to take, And was poffeft of his new found make. Then up he tooke the flumbred fencelefle corfe, And ere he could out of his fwoone awake, Him to his caftle brought with hafty force, And in a dungeon deepe him threw without remorfe. From that day forth Duessa was his deare, And highly honoured in his haughty eye. He gave her gold and purple pall to weare, And triple crowne set on her head full high, And her endow'd with royal majefty. Then for to make her dreaded more of men, And peoples hearts with awfull terror tie, A monftrous beaft ybred in filthy fen He chofe, which he had kept long time in darkefome den. Such one it was as that renowmed Snake, Which great Alcides in Stremona flew, Long foftred in the filth of Lerna lake, Whofe many heads outbubbling ever new, Did breed him endlefle labour to fubdew. But this fame monfter much more ugly was, For 7 great heads out of his body grew, An iron breaft, and backe of fcaly brafle, And all embrewed in blood, his eyes did fhine as glafle. His taile was ftretcht out in wondrous length, That to the houfe of heavenly Gods it wrought, And with extorted powre and borrowed ftrength The ever burning lampes from thence it brought, And proudly threw to ground as things of nought, And underneath his filthy feet did tread The sacred things, and holy heafts foretaught. Upon this dreadfull beaft with 7fold head He set the falfe Duessa, for more awe and dread. The wofull Dwarfe, which faw his mafters fall, Whileft he had keeping of his grazing fteed, And valiant knight became a cative thrall, When all was paft, tooke up his forlorne weed, His mighty armour, missing moft at need, His filver fhield, now idle, masterlefle, His poignant fpeare, that many made to bleed, The ruefull monuments of heavinefle, And with them all departs, to tell his great diftrefle. He had not travayled long, when on the way He wofull Lady, wofull Una met, Fast flying from the Paynims greedy prey, Whileft Satyrane him from purfuit did let, Who when her eyes fhe on the Dwarfe had set, And faw the fignes that deadly tidings fpake, She fell to ground for sorrowfull regret, And lively breath her fad breaft did forsake, Yet might her piteous heart be feene to pant and quake. The messenger of fo unhappy newes Would faine have died, dead was his heart within, Yet outwardly some little comfort fhews. At laft recovering heart, he does begin To rub her temples, and to chafe her chin, And every tender part does tofle and turn, So hardly he the flitted life does win, Unto her native prison to return. Then gins her grieved ghoft thus to lament and mourn. Ye dreary instruments of dolefull sight, that do this deadly spectacle behold, why do ye linger feed on lothed light, or liking find to gaze on earthly mould? Sith cruel Fates the carefull threedes unfold, the which my life and love together tyde. Now let the stony dart of sencelefle cold Pierce to my heart, and pass through every side, And let eternal night so sad sight from me hyde. O lightfome day, the lamp of higheft Jove, Firft made by him, mens wandring wayes to guide, When darknefle he in deepeft dungeon drove, Henceforth thy hated face for ever hyde, And shut up heavens windowes shining wide. For earthly fight can nought but forrow breed, And late repentance, which fhall long abide. Mine eyes no more on vanity fhall feed, But fealed up with death fhall have their deadly meed. Then downe againe fhe fell unto the ground, But he her quickly reared up againe. Thrice did fhe finke adowne in deadly fwound, And thrice he her revived with busie paine. At laft when life recovered had the reine, And over wreftled his ftrong enemy, With faltring tongue and trembling every veine. Tell on, quoth fhe, the wofull tragedy, The which thefe reliques fad prefent unto mine eye. Tempestuous Fortune hath spent all her spight, And thrilling Sorrow thrown his utmoft dart. Thy sad tongue cannot tell more heavy plight, Then that I feel, and harbour in my heart. Who hath endur'd the whole, can bear each part. If death it be, it is not the firft wound, That launcht hath my breast with bleeding fmart. Begin, and end the bitter balefull ftound. If leffe then that I feare, more favour I have found. Then gan the Dwarfe the whole difcourfe declare, The fubtle traines of Archimago old, The wanton loves of falfe Fidessa faire, Brought with the blood of vanquifht Paynim bold, The wretched pair transform'd to treen mould, The houfe of pride, and perils round about, The combat, which he with fans joy did hold, The lucklefle conflict with the Gyant ftout, Wherein captiv'd, or life or death he stood in doubt. She heard with patience all unto the end, And ftrove to mafter sorrowfull affay, Which greater grow, the more fhe did contend, And almoft rent her tender heart in tway, And love frefh coales unto her fire did lay. For greater love, the greater is the loffe. Was never lady loved dearer day, Then fhe did love the Knight of the Red Crofle, For whofe deare fake fo many troubles did her tofle. At laft, when fervent sorrow flaked was, She up arofe, resolving him to find Alive or dead, and forward doth pafle, All as the Dwarfe the way to her affigned. And evermore in conftant carefull mind She fed her wound with frefh renewed bale, Long loft with ftormes, and bet with bitter wind. High over hills, and low adown the dale, She wandred many a wood, and measured many a vale. At laft fhe chaunft by good hap to meet A goodly Knight, faire marching by the way, Together with his Squire, arrayed meet. His glitt'rand armour fhined farre away, Like glauncing light of Phoebus brighteft ray. From top to toe no place appeared bare, The deadly dint of steele endangered may. Athwart his breast a baldrick brave he wore, That fhined, like twinkling starres, with ftones moft precious rare. And in the midft thereof one precious ftone, Of wondrous worth, and eke of wondrous mights, Shaped like a Ladies head, exceeding fhone, Like Hesperus among the leffer lights, And ftrove for to amaze the weaker fights. Thereby his mortal blade full comely hung In ivory fheath, ycarved with curious flights, Whofe hilts were burnifht gold, and handles ftrong Of mother pearle, and buckled with a golden tongue. His haughty helmet, horrid all with gold, Both glorious brightnefle and great terror bred. For all the crest a Dragon did enfold, With greedy paws, and over all did fpread His golden wings. His dreadfull hideous head, Clofe coucht on the bever, feem'd to throw From flaming mouth bright sparkles fiery red, That fudden horror to faint hearts did fhow, And fcaly taile was ftretcht adowne his back full low. Upon the top of all his lofty crest A bunch of hares difcoloured diverfly, With fprinckled pearle, and gold full richly dreft, Did shake, and feem'd to daunce for jollity, Like to an almond tree imounted high On top of green Salinis all alone, With bloffomes brave bedecked daintily, Whofe tender locks do tremble every one At every little breath, that under heaven is blowne. His warlike fhield all clofely covered was, No might of mortal eye be ever feene, Not made of fteele, nor of enduring brafle, Such earthly metals foone confumed beene, But all of diamond perfect, pure and cleene. It framed was, one maffe entire mould, Hewne out of adamant rock with engines keene, That point of fpeare it never piercen could, nor dint of direful sword divide the substance would. The fame to wight he never once difclofe, but when as monfters huge he would difmay, or daunt unequall armies of his foes, or when the flying heavens he would affray, for fo exceeding glon his glistering ray, that Phoebus golden face it did attaint, as when a cloud his beames doth overlay, and silver Cynthia waxed pale and faint, as when her face is stained with magique arts conftraint. No magique arts hereof had any might, nor bloody words of bold enchanters call, but all that was not fuch, as feemed in fight, before that fhield did fade, and fudden fall. And when him lift the rafcall routs appall, men into ftones therewith he could transmew, and ftones to dust, and dust to nought at all. And when him lift the prouder look fubdew, he would them gazing blind, or turne to other hew. Ne let it feeme, that credence this exceeds, for he that made the fame was known right well to have done much more admirable deeds. It Merlin was, which whilome did excell all living wights in might of magique fpell. Both fhield and fword and armour all he wrought for this young Prince, when firft to armes he fell. But when he died, the Faerie Queene it brought to Faerie Land, where yet it may be feene, if fought. A gentle youth, his dearely loved Squire, his fpeare of Hebon wood befide him bare, whofe harmfull head, thrice heated in the fire, had riven many a breft with pikehead fquare. A goodly perfon, and could menage faire his ftubborn fteed with curbed cannon bit, who under him did trample as the aire, and chaft, that any on his backe fhould fit, the iron rowels into frothy foam he bit. When as this Knight nigh to the Lady drew, with lovely court he gan her entertaine. But when he heard her anfwers loth, he knew Some fecret forrow did her heart diftraine, which to allay and calme her storming paine, Faire feeling words he wifely gan difplay, and for her humour fitting purpofe faine, to tempt the caufe it felfe for to bewray. Wherewith emoved, thefe bleeding words she gan to say. What worlds delight, or joy of living fpeech, Can heart fo plunged in fea of forrows deep, And heaped with fo huge misfortune reach? The carefull cold beginneth for to creep, And in my heart his iron arrows fteep, Soone as I thinke upon my bitter bale. Such helplefle harmes it's better hidden keep, Then rip up griefe, where it may not availe. My laft left comfort is, my woes to weepe and waile. Ah Lady deare, quoth then the gentle Knight, well may I weene your griefe is wondrous great, for wondrous great griefe groaneth in my fpight, While thus I heare you of your forrows treat. But wofull Lady, let me you entreat, For to unfold the anguifh of your heart. Mishaps are maystred by advice difcreet, And counsell mitigates the greateft fmart. Found never help, who never would his hurts impart. O but, quoth fhe, great griefe will not be told, And can more eafily be thought then faid. Right fo, quoth he, but he that never would, could never. Will to might gives greateft aid, but griefe, quoth fhe, does greater grow difplayd, if then it finds not help, and breeds difpaire. Difpaire breeds not, quoth he, where faith is stayd. No faith fo faft, quoth fhe, but flefh does paire. Flefh may empaire, quoth he, but reafon can repaire. His goodly reafon and well guided fpeech So deepe did fettle in her gracious thought, That her perfwaded to difclofe the breach, Which love and fortune in her heart had wrought, And said, Faire Sir, I hope good hap hath brought You to enquire the fecrets of my griefe, Or that your wisdom will direct my thought, Or that your proweffe can me yield reliefe. Then heare the story fad, which I fhall tell you briefe. The forlorn maiden, whom your eyes have feene, The laughing stock of fortunes mockeries, And the only daughter of a King and Queene, Whofe parents deare, whileft equall deftinies Did run about, and their felicities The favourable heavens did not envy, Did fpread their rule through all the territories, Which Pison and Euphrates floweth by, And Gehons golden waves do wafh continually. Till that their cruel cursed enemy, An huge Dragon horrible in fight, Bred in the loathly lakes of Tartary, With murdrous ravine and devouring might Their kingdom spoyled, and country wafted quite. Themfelves, for feare into his jawes to fall, He forced to castles ftrong to take their flight, Where faft embarr'd in mighty brazen wall, He has them now 4 yeares befieged to make them thrall. Full many knights adventurous and ftout Have enterprized that monfter to fubdew, From every coaft that heaven walks about, Have thither come the noble martial crew, That famous hard atchievement ftill purfew. But never any could that girland win, But all ftill fhrunk, and ftill he greater grew. All they for want of faith, or guilt of fin, The piteous pray of his fierce cruelty have been. At laft yled with farre reported praife, Which flying fame throughout the world had fpred, Of doughty knights, whom Faerie land did raife, That noble order hight of maidenhead, Forthwith to court of Gloriane I fped, Of Gloriane, great Queene, of glory bright, Whofe kingdome feat Cleopolis is red, There to obtaine fome fuch redouted knight, That parents deare from tyrants powre deliver might. It was my chaunce was faire and good, Therefore to find a frefh unproved knight, Whofe manly hands imbrewed in guilty blood Had never been, nor ever by his might Had throwne to ground the unregarded right. Yet of his prowefle proofe he fince hath made, I witnefle am, in many a cruel fight. The groaning ghofts of many one difmayd Have felt the bitter dint of his avenging blade. And ye the forlorne reliques of his powre, His biting fword, and his devouring fpeare, Which have endured many a dreadful ftowre, Can fpeake his prowefle, that did erft you beare, And well could rule, now he hath left you here, To be the record of his ruefull lofle, And of my dolefull disadventures deare. O heavy record of the good red crofle! Where have you left your Lord, that could fo well you tofle? Well hoped I, and faire beginnings had, That he my captive languor fhould redeeme, Till all unweeting an enchanter bad His fence abufed, and made him to misdeeme My loyalty, not fuch as it did feeme, That rather death defire, then fuch defpight. Be judged, ye heavens, that all things right efteeme, How I him loved, and love with all my might. So thought I eke of him, and think I ought aright. Thenceforth me defolate he quite forsooke To wander, where wild fortune would me lead, And other bywayes he himfelfe betooke, Where never foot of living wight did tread, That brought not backe the balefull body dead. In which him chaunce falfe Duessa meet, Mine onely foe, mine onely deadly dread, Who with her witchcraft and mifleeming fweet Inveigled him to follow her defires unmeet. At laft by fubtle flights fhe him betrayd Unto his foe, a Gyant huge and tall, Who him disarmed, dissolute, difmayd, Unawares furprized, and with mighty mall The monfter mercilefle him made to fall, Whofe fall did never foe before behold. And now in darkfome dungeon, wretched thrall, Remedilefle, for aye he doth him hold. This is my caufe of griefe, more great then may be told. Ere fhe had ended all, fhe gan to faint, But he her comforted, and faire befpake. Certes, Madam, ye have great caufe of plaint, That ftouteft heart, I weene, could caufe to quake. But be of cheare, and comfort ye take, For till I have acquit your captive knight, Affure your felfe I will not you forsake. His chearefull words revived her chearelefle fpright, So forth they went, the Dwarfe them guiding ever right. Canto VII. Book I. The Legend of the Knight of Red Cross.